So I have a couple of questions, but I can ask them at the same time. So I'll just start with the proliferation of AI everywhere. Would you say that AI is taking over, or are we still in the phase of testing and seeing how AI and human can collaborate? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another podcast episode of Everything AI and Lore. Today, I have Cody Schneider. I actually like your name, but yeah, Cody is I believe he's a forefront runner of invention on AI, because he not only has two companies, Draft AI and Swell AI, but he's like at the middle of debunking the myths around AI and, dishing out practical strategies on how to integrate AI into workflows without losing the human element. Hi, Cody. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, too. Thanks for hosting me. Super excited to be here and hopefully can provide some value and insight to your audience.
Okay, so tell me about yourself and Draft AI, Swell AI, and anything else you want the audience to know about.
Yeah. So we've been in this space for about the last 2.5 years. My co-founder and I, who are working on kind of all these companies together, and our whole strategy is we launch these things, we've put teams in place, and then they run and operate them. But we were working at a company together called Rupa Health and doing a lot of this type of work previously, where basically we were building out a media arm of the company. So imagine a bunch of live classes, podcasts, blog posts, email newsletters, Instagram accounts, etc. While I was there and working at that company, we ended up having, I think by the end of it, it was like a team of 25 to 30 people, depending on how you wanted to count, that were entirely working on the content process, the generation process. And so as we started to see these AI tools and technologies start to come into kind of a state of being where they were actually usable, they could actually create outputs that were good enough. We started, everybody I knew that was at the time I was in San Francisco living out there. Everybody I knew started experimenting with these. So fast forward, we realized there was this opportunity to basically take long format audio or video content. It's a great source material, and then we can transform that into basically any type of media that you can imagine. That can turn into clips, that can turn into blog posts, that can turn into email newsletters, that can turn into LinkedIn posts. You can kind of extract all of this data from that raw file and then organize it and transform it into something new. And so I think that's the real idea I see with most, really the best implementation of AI for businesses or companies is when AI is incredible at taking basically unstructured data and then structuring it. And so that is really where I feel like a lot of these businesses are creating the most impact for themselves. So happy to dive deeper on any of that, but that's kind of where we spent the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years now, experimenting with. So
I have a couple of questions, but I can ask them at the same time. So I'll just start with the proliferation of AI everywhere, would you say that AI is taking over, or are we still in the phase of testing and seeing how AI and human can collaborate?
Yeah, I think it's way more on the human and AI collaboration. A lot of, I think we're still incredibly early, right? We're seeing kind of a renaissance happen currently within the mobile app ecosystem. In particular, these huge categories that people were they're impossible to disrupt. For example, calorie counting. If you look at MyFitnessPal as an example, it's a huge juggernaut within that space. Nobody thought that, they could ever basically overtake them. And there's all these AI startups now that are coming, and they are basically supplementing them because it's a better solution, right? So there's this one, it's called Cal AI. You literally take a photo of your food and it tells you what the calorie count is, what the the macros are on it. And then you can log that automatically within, I ate this basically, right? So it's not a new thing that's happening. It's still calorie counting, but it's a new medium that basically is occurring on. And so when I really, talk about this with anybody, it's just a base technology change that's happened. The internet was one, going to mobile was one. This is another one. It allows for these new functionalities that just previously were impossible, right? And so really any of these categories or things that people are doing, they can be supplemented. Again, I think everybody's fearful about, oh, this is going to replace me, or this is going to, take all these jobs, etc. I personally don't think that's going to happen. I think what it really does is it makes somebody superhuman that is already super like good at their job, right? Like if you're a 10x, marketer or a 10x lawyer or whatever your career is, and you start to supplement yourself with these tools that basically make you more effective at doing your work, you just become, more, you can have more throughput, more output, more impact than anybody else around you, right? And so I think that's the really where I see this all going, and kind of the opportunity as well. Like if you're, a young, professional in really any industry, and you're trying to get ahead or make an impact or kind of find whatever that alpha is and grab it. If you just understand how to use these tools and implement them better than your colleagues, like you're going to run circles around them from an outcome standpoint. So anyway.
So to piggyback on the young professionals or even professionals generally, so let's talk about law. So how have you seen it being useful? I mean, AI and AI tools being useful to lawyers? Because I know you were talking about it before the recording, so I'd like you to just talk about it now as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the two things that I've seen and like personally have interacted with is, so one is basically like the research and the structuring of the information from unstructured. So imagine you have, here's 10,000 page document and you're like, okay, I have to go through all this and extract all of this information related to the case. But traditionally it'd be like, I have to go and read through this whole thing to identify each of those places. So what AI is incredible at is basically taking that whole document, and then I can start querying against it to point me in the direction of things that could be related to what I'm looking for. Or I can say, hey, extract all the information that's related to this specific topic or these, specific keywords, etc. So there's this tool set, it's called a vector database. So a vector database, basically how it functions is I can have like a massive amount of just like raw text or raw information. And what it allows for me to do, it's almost like imagine like a Google as a search engine, but for that specific document, where I can tell it, hey, I'm looking for information related to this. The goal is this outcome. Can you help me go find that from this document? It goes in there and it basically finds all of that information and can pull that out for you. And a lot of these like law and AI startups, this is really kind of their wedge into the market that we're seeing them do, is kind of that large data and analysis. And when I say data, again, it can just be like raw information in the form of like, stories, text, numbers, whatever that is. So that's kind of one side of this. And I think that when it's used as a tool in that way, this is where kind of the real impact comes from. The kind of anecdote I always say is like, if you gave somebody like an accountant Excel, right, in the early days, they're like, oh, well, we're doing this on pen and paper. Like, why would we switch? But then, suddenly they can do their job at 10x the speed. Excel is just a tool that they're using to do their job more effectively. And I think that is where this all ends up. Kind of another way that I've seen this used. So I do a little bit of work actually in the lead generation for law practices, specifically in like personal injury, which is historically a very competitive space on the ad side. I think like the average cost per click for personal injury related keywords is like $120 per click, right? It's insanity. And so a strategy there that you can employ is basically what's called exact match keyword domains, and then ranking those for the keywords that are high value to your company. So say, for example, it's like truck accident lawyer Fort Lauderdale, and you go and you may build a website that basically is optimizing to rank for that keyword phrase, and it just turns into lead gen for you. So historically, like a human would have to go in, build that whole website out, write all that content so that it's like relative to the search query, so that you can basically rank effectively. And there's a bunch of other stuff that is kind of happening in the background, but just this core idea is how I've seen it used for on the marketing side for law firms. But instead of needing that human now, we can go and spin up, 1,000 websites that are for all of these long tail keywords, and AI is writing that content, that first version. Maybe a human comes over the top and checks it as that page starts to get traffic, and audits the work that was done. But this is this other implementation that I've seen it be incredibly effective for, where it's like, instead of having to, to spin up, pay somebody to go and make 1,000 websites. We can now have that live in like 48 hours, right? It's something that we're seeing from a scale standpoint. And so there's tons of applications. I think we're still figuring out like what it's good at. But it's kind of, again, because of these like base technologies that exist with it, it's really changed what we can and can't do. Like, for example, we just stumbled on this idea where it's like, oh, I can just like take a photo of any wine, right? When I'm at like a grocery store and I'm like, tell me everything about this, right? And it's like, tells me the tasting notes and the history of the vineyards and like, what's the average price point? And it's like, I mean, and that's just like something that's basically built into, it's an API call that's happening. Super simple. Like, it's not a complex thing. I don't even have to build a database of information. It's just querying the internet and then pulling back that information for me. I think that we're still on this kind of forefront of discovering what this can actually be used for. And I think the other thing that is like really powerful and impactful for companies is when they use this on top of data that they only have, right? This is actually where the value comes from. It's like if they have a data set that nobody else has access to, whether that's internal company data or documents or historical cases that they have in their back catalog that they can pull out and reference to. That's when it becomes even more powerful, is when you're using AI to interact with your data rather than just using the general knowledge of the LLM to do something for you. Like if I go and I tell the LLM, write me a blog post about, we'll say truck accidents in Oklahoma. Like what's the statistics behind it? It's going to just randomly generate like based off of the knowledge that it has. In contrast, if I'm like, hey, here's, 40 pages of information related, and it could be like government documents as an example, related to all of the accident information for car accidents, truck accidents within Oklahoma. Take that and now write me a blog post based off of this information that I provided. The outcomes and what it produces is going to actually be true. It's going to actually be real. So by giving it these constraints that it has to work within, that's where you see kind of like all of the value, all of the impact coming from. So
I'm curious to know, so would you advise for businesses that have their data to use API calls from like maybe ChatGPT or build their own models? Yeah,
great question. This is a huge concern with everybody, is who owns the data, like we don't want it to go off-prem, et cetera. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of success with these open source models that can run it on premises or within their own cloud, right? Examples of this are like Mistral AI, which is out of Paris. Like Grok is another one that's starting to become popular for this. Llama from Facebook Meta is also popular with this. And even ChatGPT, you can get enterprise licenses where it runs like in its like own confined kind of system or area. They emphasize like, hey, we're not training off this data, but there still is that data transfer that is happening, when you're doing those API calls. But there is options to be able to run these, locally within a confined environment. And that's how I would suggest it for any company, especially if they're dealing with sensitive information, like if it's related to any personal information that you don't want to have be public. It's just a way to kind of like lock down that. But a lot of these models now can be ran. They're called like GPU clouds. It's just like what cloud computing used to be, so historically it's like we would, think of it, the classic like rack of servers, right? So it's that same idea, but now it's this different compute, which is GPU versus CPU. These GPUs, I can just go and buy basically processing time just like I used to be able, or just like I can buy that CPU time. And so I can basically like have my own contained cloud where all of this information is being processed on. There is, it basically creates that confinement of that information so that it's not lost. So.
Okay. Can you mention examples of the GPUs? I'm just inquisitive.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah, so GPUs versus CPUs. So CPUs, they're really so GPUs originally they were really created to do graphics processing, which is like a very intense. It's multi-vector thing that's happening. So it's like way more nodes within a system of like processing data information. What they found is that these GPUs are really good at kind of like mimicking how brains function really. So it's like when we think about a brain. It's really just like a bunch of neurons that are set up in a specific pattern that fire at specific cadences, and that creates thought, right? So what they're doing when they use these GPUs is they're basically creating these neural nets. And like when we say AI, this is like actually what's happening. It's basically a model that is trained to kind of think in a specific way based off of these neural nets that are being ran on these GPU clouds. So a GPU, when you like, if you hear that, just think about, okay, that is the kind of base machine that is allowing for all this processing to happen. When you think about like, or you hear about like Amazon hosting or Google hosting or like Microsoft Azure hosting, a lot of the times that's just CPUs. So it's basically, that's how we go and access the internet. GPUs are specifically used for like, whenever I prompt, ChatGPT, it's basically using that GPU processing power to return back that information for me. There's tons of stuff going on in this space. Like, as everybody probably knows that's listening to this, like, this is the reason that NVIDIA is skyrocketing as a company, is because every business, like including my own, is built on top of this infrastructure. And they are basically the only company in the world that can produce these GPUs at a, advanced level. That they're just like ahead of all their competitors, right? So if you're trying to compete within this space, that is like the only thing that you want to use. One of the core ones, and again, just to educate the audience, is called an H100. That's like the most common, and a lot of the times, like when you think about like any of these clouds of GPUs, that's what they're using. So anyway, yeah, I don't want to get too technical if people won't find it interesting, but that's kind of the high level of it all. So.
Well, thank you. So I know we've spoken about the privacy concerns and how to, work around that. So what are the strategies, or what are the steps should businesses put in place when, or if they're thinking about implementing AI? Should every business implement AI or not?
I think there's a huge opportunity for every business to do this.
Okay.
Largely because it's just taking especially when it's just replace, like it's not like the implementation of AI doesn't work when you're trying to adopt a new workflow or a new, kind of paradigm of how your company needs to function. The best way to do this is like, hey, here is Joanne, right? And she's doing this task that takes her hours of time every day. And a lot of it is like paperwork and, basically just like, it's like time consuming tasks of analyzing data and, transforming it or pulling it out or whatever that ends up being. AI is unbelievably good at doing that job, right? And a lot of the times, like especially when it's paperwork, where it's like, hey, we have this raw data and we need it in this format. It's incredible at doing that. And so if you can come in and suddenly you took, her job, and what used to take her 6 hours now takes only 10 minutes, right? And her time is freed up. Two things happen. One, I can have like a greater, caseload. Two, I can basically like take that kind of mind-numbing task that a human was doing, and I can offboard it to, again, this machine, so that they can focus on the things that are more high impact for your business. The example I always use is especially like related to sales, right? So with like sales, like a lot of the times, doing the prospecting, identifying the right person to reach out to, that's like a huge time consuming thing. AI is really incredible at that. So the salesperson can focus on all of the human levels of that sales process, which is like building relationships and actually talking to people. With all that said, though, I think it's like for most companies, so, especially, I've seen this within the law space, like they bill on an hourly, right? So it's not actually good if you're saving them time. It's like, it's not really outcomes driven. So that's like, I know I have friends that are like building, products in this space. And they're like, yeah, we're having to like navigate around that. But if we can, kind of the angles that they're coming at this from is, if we can make lawyers basically more effective at their jobs, like have more information, more knowledge, at a faster pace, then can they basically see more cases? Can they increase that billable hours time and have more wins, which positively affects the firm, et cetera. So anyway, yeah, I think there's always the political sides of this internally of like what actually makes the company money, but I think that for most businesses, a lot of the admin tasks are going to just entirely be automated away. Also, just things that, I don't think people even realize are coming down. Like an example of this is my friend's company. It's basically an AI receptionist for restaurants. So like you call your local pizzeria and it's like 5 p.m., right? And like nobody picks up the phone because they're during their busy hour, right? So what this thing basically does is it answers the phone. It answers questions about the menu. It takes the person's order. And then like can text them basically a link to pay for that order, all on itself. So it's like that company never misses a call. It basically makes more money. They make more money off of their takeout revenue, et cetera. Those types of technologies are going to come to everything, right? We're already seeing it implemented at dentist office. We're already seeing it implemented at physicians' practices. Any of these where it's like a high call volume, a lot of it is just answering questions. Where it gets super interesting is when these AI tools can tap into the data of that restaurant, as an example, and it can answer specific questions based on that menu. So it has all the knowledge of like, here's the prices and here's the different appetizers. And like, it can also upsell them like, oh, do you want a dessert as well? And they're like, well, I don't know. Like, what is it? Right. And then it can say it. So it can be really impactful. Again, I think we're just so early at these stages. We don't really know where it fits into, but I think in every part of our life, in some way, it's going to start, kind of creeping in just slowly. And certain industries is going to take, way longer than others. Finance, as an example, like anything that's like high risk for failure. Yeah, exactly. Like marketing, it's like one of the easiest ones, right? Like if we mess up, it's like we can go and fix it. So like a lot of the internet is malleable. But it's way different where it's like, oh, this is a grid system, and we mess this up, and these 200,000 homes don't have power. It's there's kind of different things that have higher stakes. I think as time goes on, though, like there's going to be custom models that are built for each of those industries that are fine tuned to like really be hyper focused on accuracy, on truth, on that information. So anyway.
So, what do you think about AGI? Are we ever going to get to AGI, and do you want us to get there?
I don't think we. So just to put this on scale of like what's necessary for this. So and for context as well, my girlfriend is a material science engineer. She spent like her grad program basically researching neuromorphic materials for like how do we mimic like brain function within non-organic materials. Yeah. And one of the big things is like the amount of power that would be needed to like mimic a human brain right now, like just from like a neuron structure with our current technology, like that doesn't even exist on planet Earth at this moment. Like if you took all the power that is available on a daily basis and like allocated it to basically running a neural net as we know it, to mimic a human brain, like there isn't enough power in the world. Number one. Number two, there isn't enough compute in the world to do this as well. That's like if you see these headlines within, whatever, Wall Street Journal or any of these where it's like Sam Altman wants to raise, $1.3 trillion so that they can create AGI. Like what is really being said there and like what's actually happening is they're just doing the math of like, oh, if we want to mimic a brain and like create like a 10x version of a brain that has like 10 or 10x more neurons than what a brain has. Like this is how much basically energy we think we need and how much compute we think we need to be able to do that. So with that said, I think there's going to be like very interesting uses of like basically like these models are going to get very good at specific things, and you can already do this, kind of train them down to be good at very specific tasks. And I think for a lot of people, the scope of the model will be able to mimic certain human like activities. Like for example, like I think it's inevitable that kind of like robots that assists in factories doing like repetitive tasks, like that's a very natural thing. It's going to happen, in the next probably even 2 to 3 years. And for those types of use cases, like they don't have to have critical thinking or creativity. It's kind of just like I'm doing an activity. I have to have this type of body awareness. So I think that that's probably like more what happens. And maybe from the outside looking in, you're like, oh, this thing is thinking, like it is identifying like oranges versus apples and sorting and, doing all these activities. But I don't think that it's going to almost like mimic and look like it, but it's not going to actually be it. I think this all evolves, like, and I don't know, again, like everybody, like I have no idea where this goes, right? We have nobody knows what happens with this, but I think the thing that is probably most likely to occur is that there is like it's doing human activities or things that we would classify as human, but it's doing them in a completely different way. But it's again kind of mimicking like what other human experiences are. And so then where is that line drawn? Like, is that actually, is it actually thinking if it's doing things that are human, that look and feel and like thinking? So anyway, yeah, these are kind of a lot of the large questions that I feel like everybody in the industry is asking. But again, I like everybody, I have no idea where this all goes. So
Fingers crossed. Let's see.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, totally.
Okay, so we have two parties, like two people at the extremes. There are people who, maybe not extremes, there are people who support AI or like AI enthusiasts, and then there are the people who, they're like, kill AI. AI is not good. AI can maybe like take out the world in future. So like, let's just kill it now and all. And also we have the AI regulations. So how would you advise businesses who are, trying to take advantage of the AI, not really the buzz, but the advantages of AI, while still try not to invest too much because they don't know what the laws can be, e.g. the EU AI Act, and also
Yeah,
just managing
totally.
the regulation and the innovation side of AI.
I think it's crazy to think that you're gonna like stop this at this point. Like I can go and download a model from like Hugging Face, right? Which is like this
Right.
open source directory, and like I can run that on some GPUs in my living room. And like it can do things like crazy things, right? Off of like super limited power and like, things that like a normal person can just buy off of Amazon. So I think it's very unrealistic to think that you're going to put like a cap on this. It is kind of fascinating, this like deceleration movement or like people moving away from like wanting the progress with it. I think it's just happening so fast that it's scary. Like on a weekly basis, I see something where I'm like, that is the most insane thing I've ever seen, right? Like, and right now, kind of the thing that's going viral is like all of these tools that like help people build like out applications without them knowing how to code, right? Like they just go and they chat with this basically. One of them's called bolt.new, another one's called create.xyz. There's another one called cursor, which is a little bit more complex, but like bolt as an example or create, I can just go in and prompt something like, make me a audio journaling app that has a button that I click and I speak into it, and then it transcribes the audio and saves it, and then I want to be able to chat with those transcriptions later. And like in seconds, it can create these applications that are fully functional and deploy them, right? And so I think that, with all this kind and where this is going, like it's kind of, I hate the word democratize, but it's going to make this more accessible to a lot of people to be able to like solve problems, like, and really like build products that solve their own problems internally at a scale and a pace that, never was seen before. And also on this like decelerations, I just don't see how you stop it. Like, it's just, there's so much value that is in these tools, right? And like, it's going to be very hard to strip them away, especially as companies start to adopt them, right? Like if you want to be competitive, like as a US company now, you need to be figuring out like, how do I implement this within my organization?
Right.
Because all of my competitors are doing it. So it's a cost cutting function, right? And a lot of the times it cut costs, and then it also like increases the ability to make more revenue. So if you have both of those things simultaneously happening, like you're seeing these companies just absolutely skyrocket because of this. And so I think that, maybe regulation happens. I think in the US, like a lot of that regulation is to try to stop other companies from entering the market and disrupting this, because there is so much, it's almost like to protect, the large ones that already exist, Anthropic, ChatGPT, Google. They don't want other people to, or other competitors to come in and enter this market, right? Like that's like a bad thing for them. And so I think that is probably a component of this based off of like what's happening and like kind of how they're lobbying the government. I don't think that happens though long term, just because there's so much value. Also, I think it's very uncompetitive to stop this, especially when adversary countries are all investing heavily in this even from a government subsidy standpoint, right? Like if you look at, Russia and China, like they are putting a lot of resources into the development of this. And so if we kind of hinder this and stop this, like within the West, I think that it's, going to put us in a very tricky situation long term. Again, I'm not an expert on any of this. I have a little bit of economics background just from my education, but that's there's people that are way smarter about this than I am.
So for now, you use the example of democratizing technology skills, so anyone can just like create, meet this and that. I'm trying to imagine how software engineers feel about this, because then what's going to be their use? I'm not entirely saying they're going to go into extinction, but this is crazy.
It's wild. Yeah, I think there's like a subset of software engineers that are like, oh my God, my job is gone. And then there's this other subset that's like, oh my God, I've like just turned into God, and like we just had this with like one of our recent like products, like our engineering team, like none of them program in this language called PHP. We needed to build out like this small like app that basically plugs into WordPress sites, which is like this website builder that powers like 40% of the internet, right? And again, none of them know how to program this, but they go into one of these AI tools, and in 3 hours they basically build out this product just prompting with natural language that is entirely written in a language that they have no, understanding about, right? So I think when it's employed as a tool that they're using within their workflows, it just makes them so much more impactful. And that's why you're seeing like these apps get shipped so quickly, like created and pushed and published to the world so quickly, is because of this. It's because you can do things at a pace that were like just previously impossible. And like this is also happening on the marketing side as well, right? Like there's this kind of playbook that's happening right now again in the apps ecosystem, where like I'm just going to use Cal AI again as an example because it's public and you can go see this. All they've done for their marketing is basically made like user generated content videos that's showing people how to use the app. And that goes viral on TikTok, which makes signups happen for it. And then what people have started to realize is like, oh, I can use AI avatars, speaking scripts, and then I'm going to edit the clips just like I would with like a human. But instead of making, one video a day, I can make 20 videos a day. And let's run those across multiple TikTok accounts, multiple Instagram Shorts accounts. And simultaneously, I have an engineering team that's using AI to program. I have a marketing team that's using AI to build out all of this media. And like they're running circles around these companies because they can move so quickly at a pace and at a volume that's just like it was impossible before, or just logistically would be impossible. Like our resources would be impossible. These early stage companies just wouldn't be able to do this whatsoever unless they had ridiculous amounts of funding. So again, just crazy stuff we're kind of seeing from the front lines of all this.
So with the use of AI tools for content creation, where's the balance, or where does the human element go? Does it go away? I mean, authenticity.
Yeah, I think deep knowledge is more valuable than it's ever been before. Like if you're an expert in a field, like expertise is more valuable than it's ever been before. How I typically try to explain this is like if I go and I ask, ChatGPT, hey, write me a blog post about, hotel marketing 2024. And it goes and it's going to write some like very average article, right? Because it's going to write to the average. It's ingested all this information. And like when you think about the internet, like it's pretty average. Most of the content is very average. Right. And so it's going to write to kind of that middle of the bell curve. In contrast, if I went and I interviewed 10 hotel marketing experts, I'm like, hey, what are the trends you're seeing for 2024? And I have a conversation with them. I record those conversations, say they're 45 minutes long. I take all those, I turn them into transcripts. And then I'm like, okay, AI, now write the same thing, but based off of this information or data I provided. The output quality is going to be unbelievable. Like it's going to be more than even a human could do, because it's going to connect all these dots between those conversations that like a human probably wouldn't. So I think that's a component of it. Expertise is more valuable than it's ever been before. The other thing that like I think that I mean we're starting to see more and more is that people don't really care as long as the content is good. What they don't like is bad content, right? And
Right.
so like if they don't care if it's an AI avatar, if the information is like valuable and novel and educational or whatever that cross section is between those three, they don't care where it comes from, right? And it's probably just how we're wired as as people. Like we just kind of like if it's a good idea, it's a good idea, right? And I think that that is more important than ever before. It's like I can go and write a very average blog post for nothing right now, right? But writing a very unique, novel, new idea piece of content is harder than it ever has been before. And so if you can figure out how to do that, and there's all these different ways that you can do that. Like again, you can interview people, you can source all this information, like by scraping the internet and then putting into like a document, and then having AI be like, hey, list all of the different insights from this. Okay, now tell me which ones are the most unique that you haven't seen like before. And then it goes and identifies, 100 different insights, but here's the top 5 that are the most uncommon or like new ideas, basically. So it can be used in these processes, but I think, more than ever, the human expertise is more valuable than it's ever been. If you can capture that though, and then give that to an AI, then it becomes like more powerful. And I think a lot of companies are trying to figure out how to do this. Like we have all this knowledge, all this expertise. Like if you're a law firm, there's all these things that just because of your history and all of the experience that's had. If I can somehow capture that, save that, and then pass that on to other people, or even just like make a chat bot that people can go and talk with internally, that's all of this knowledge that they can interact with. That can become a really powerful and valuable asset for a company that no other company has access to, and it creates a competitive advantage for them.
So like data gotten from experts and like rare data is
Exactly.
the new oil, if I may say.
Totally. And I think that, we probably since 2016, that's been a topic, right? Like data is the new oil. It's the most valuable thing ever. Previously, though, it was just so hard to interact with that data, to understand that data, to have it tell stories. In contrast, with AI, it's so capable at taking raw data and being like, what does this mean? Or like, how should I be thinking about this? And then generating that, right? Understanding that copious amounts of, and this is really what's happening in all of these fields, especially, we're talking about the small subset, which is like LLMs. But if you go out into like biotech or, anything that's happening in the like hard sciences and how they're using this technology, they're basically building these custom models that like understand how proteins fold, right? And so, traditionally in a lab, it's like, oh, maybe I could only fold a protein like every week, and to try out like a different structure to see if I could use this within a drug. Well, these AIs, they can fold a protein like every minute. So I can go and test a million different protein folds and see if it accomplishes the outcomes that I'm looking for, right? And I think that is like the game that's happening here. It allows you to have like so many more at bats than previously were ever possible. But simultaneously, we also don't understand how a lot of these things work, right? Just like we don't understand how the human brain functions. When you look at like, all the research on the human brain, it's like we kind of have a vague idea of like where does thought come from and all this. But like in reality, we're like, it's kind of this like black box. And a lot of the times with these models, it's the same thing. Like we know that it's creating outcomes that we want, but like we have no idea how it's getting there. We have no idea how it's understanding this data, how it's assessing this data. And I think that's a scary thing to a lot of people. I think it's like, okay, well, if we don't understand it, then it can go rogue and then it can turn into this. I don't think that personally is where this all heads. I think it's, there's just like not enough energy and compute. And like, there's not going to be like a killer robot, it would be impossible to store it within that. I think what's more crazy is like when you think about the scale of like, okay, I have all of these GPUs networked globally that are all like connected and thinking. That's probably more of like the world that potentially happens in. But again, I think it's just so far off, and I don't think it happens soon based off of the current trajectory and like what people who are, again, way smarter than me about this stuff are saying.
Like generative AI is the buzzword now. Like that's what I think. We've not really scratched the surface of AI. I think we've just really delved into generative AI, which a lot of people are so
100%.
excited about. But that's not all of AI.
No,
That's just
totally. I think the most interesting stuff is happening in these other spaces, right? Where like there's all these companies that are figuring out how to like grow things like within these. Basically, it's like vats, right?
Mhm.
They're like, okay, we can go and like grow. Like for example, one that's really interesting is they can grow leather, right? So they can grow basically like tanned leather or like leather like within a vat, and then they harvest it and they can like turn it into like a leather bag as an example. So like no animal was killed in that process. It's like the same compositional structure. It's using basically they're like growing cells in a vat and then harvesting them and turning them into this product. And the like scale and outcome and the cost reduction that can occur from that. A lot of they're basically doing like bioengineering on these organisms to have them produce these material outcomes. A lot of that is like happening with these AI models that have been written, right? Where it's like they're using that as a way to help engineer these organisms that produce leather, right? Like when you kind of break down that whole thing, it's it's sci-fi. It's like we're living in this state, and I think that is how we see this being implemented, like as a tool within the tool stack to create an outcome that we're looking for. I think that's way more likely than, hey, we get replaced by these robots or whatever, a Terminator type of world in the future.
Yeah.
So
I think you're really smart. I think you're a genius. So I have two more questions.
I don't think so at all. But thank you. Very kind compliment.
Almost like in the next couple of years, you're like the Mark Zuckerberg of AI and all.
I do not think that whatsoever, and I promise you that is not true at all.
Okay, I was just joking, but yeah.
No. There's again people way smarter than me about this type of stuff. So,
but it's not the smartest people who win the most or win the biggest. Yeah, it's just what it is.
Fast. Yeah, that's very true. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I have two more questions. So what's next for Draft Horse AI, Swell AI, and you generally in the AI field and all?
Yeah, I think what we're really excited about, again, is this kind of like automation workflows. We're really focused on the content and the marketing side, just what we have a deep kind of expertise and knowledge in. Where I see, or what I get excited about most is like how like companies that it's just making all of this very accessible that previously wasn't. So what used to cost 30 grand, like we can now do for like 3K. And like that reduction is such a powerful thing when you start to think about that. What I am really obsessed with though is like this idea of, can I get companies to market themselves, right? Like, can we build out basically these tool sets where, imagine I have this like thing I just plug into and all I have to do is have a product or a service, and it just in the background is doing activities that are making my business grow, right? And then I just have to focus on making a great product and a great customer experience. And I think that for the first time in the history of all this, like that is entirely possible. Like all of the resources, all of the technology exists to basically like have companies kind of like proliferate or market themselves. And so I think this is the thing long term that we're really excited about exploring and trying to like, provide access to for these businesses, is just that ability. Again, I don't really know where that heads. In the immediate term, we're just trying to create, easier ways for companies to do content marketing, because that's how decisions are being made more and more. It's like less and less on a random, blog post I read on the internet, or a random, really coming down to like people buy from people. How do I enable these companies or these individuals to make media at scale that's human, that feels like them, because that's where those actual purchases are coming from. So yeah, nothing really crazy. I think it's just kind of keep walking this path forward. So
okay, so the second question, well, two in one. What are your last thoughts, and what advice would you give generally to businesses and individuals seeking to integrate AI, or people who would like to know more about AI?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just start using it. Even if it's just like a small task during your day, that is going to put you so much farther ahead of your colleagues. I don't think it has to be this massive thing to like an overhaul of your whole workflow is not something that you need to do. In contrast, if you just go and automate 10% of what you're doing with this, like you have just saved yourself so much time in the large scale of things, especially if it's like across a team or across an organization. I think that that's the biggest thing is like, don't try to overhaul a system or a process, like take out, like look at a whole system and be like, okay, what can I automate? And, what's a small bite-sized piece that I can automate? Start with 10%, then go to 20, then go to 40, then go to 60, then go to 80. And it's like, okay, like turn that into that kind of step-by-step process. And then I think the final thing, like for people that want to learn this, there is like if you go and like buy a course as an example, or like, any of these things, in all reality, you can find all of that information for free on like YouTube and like Twitter. Basically, this entire industry is happening in those two places, like as terrible as that is. But what's really kind of exciting and valuable about that is like you can basically educate yourself on whatever it is related to any of these products in those two places. And it's happening in real time. I think that's the wilder thing. Like somebody discovers something, they literally tweet about it, and then 2 hours later a YouTube video is live that's showing like, here's everything that I just kind of uncovered. And it's pretty exciting, from to get involved in that and kind of see it evolve, happen in real time. It's like, why these kind of life-changing, world-changing things are just like in publicly, being shared. And so I think that's, if you're trying to learn, that's the biggest piece of it, is just try to do small bite-sized pieces and then just look at these places that are publicly, like, again, it's evolving so quickly as well that if you buy a course, like that information is like 12 months old, right? Like so much has happened in that time period. What's way more effective is like, oh, I'm just going to spend like 30 minutes a day just kind of poking around, whether it be YouTube, whether it be like Twitter, just seeing what is happening in this space. And I think, again, like as this evolves more and more, like this is just going to become part of the normal news cycle. I think right now it's kind of this like fringe, like, thing that's happening, but it's going to seep into every part of our life. Like, I don't think it's uncommon, to think that like, then 3 years from now, everybody has a personal assistant on their phone that's like an AI, companion type thing that like helps them with kind of their daily life, right? Like, and is like something that they can like literally talk to and have a conversation with. So, and if you don't believe any of this also, and you're still not sold, what I would suggest doing is go get ChatGPT on your phone, buy the $20 a month subscription, and go and have a conversation with it. They have like an audio version now. And you can like have literally a full conversation with this thing about whatever topic or idea. And like a lot of the times what I like to do is like, I will paste in just random information and be like, hey, let's discuss or soundboard this concept. The wilder part is if you're like, yo, I want to, have a Spanish language tutor, right? And like, it will teach you Spanish and you can talk. Again, this is just still super early. Like what happens when we get to, generation 15 of this, generation 20 of this? I think it's just in these early days. And so by just adopting even like small portions of it and using that and implementing that in your life, you're going to be miles ahead of the people around you and, ahead of probably like the generations that came before you, because it's going to be way harder for them to adopt that. It's going to be way easier for, again, a young professional who's 26, just got out of grad school and is now, working in the city or whatever. Like you're going to have so much more impact and value. And just it's a leverage point that you can lean on right within your career. And so anyway, yeah, that's kind of my last call to action for everybody.
Awesome. Well, I really learned a lot and I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much, Cody. You're a genius. Like really. Wow. Okay.
Appreciate it.
You
Again,
should write a book. Have you thought about writing a book?
Yeah, I want to write one on like just how people build brands and like how that actually happens now in the internet age. I call it digital gravity, but like basically you need to build like mass on the internet to like influence more people like in your sphere. So like, if you're a small planet, you have like less influence, and like the more mass you have, the more influence you have on, everything around you. And I think that's actually how you build a brand. Like if you look at like Coca-Cola or any of these massive companies, like that's what they kind of did over time, is they built like more and more mass that builds more and more gravity for the brand. And yeah, I work mainly in early stage companies, like with startups, and this is a question that we're always wrestling with, is like, how do you take a company that nobody knows about, that doesn't exist, and in 12 months make a whole industry know it exists and make everybody know the name. And that's like kind of what I'm obsessed with as an idea. So anyway, we'll see what happens though. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to the book. I'm sure
I
it's going to be
appreciate it.
bestseller. Yeah.
We'll see about that, but thank you. Thank you
Thank
for hosting me
you.
as well. I appreciate your valuable time.
Sure, you're welcome. And thank you so much to the listeners and viewers. I'm so sure you really learned a lot because I did. And of course, I'll put the contact of Cody Schneider in the comment section or in the video tag. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone. Till next time. Bye.